And what's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Designated Players and MLS podcast. We're back finishing up the topics we couldn't finish on Monday because we just got a little bit too deep into our USMNT conversation. That being said, we are here to recover the conversation of Saudi Arabia versus MLS after Saudi Arabia has been rumored to halt all of their spending after nearly $1 billion of investment, leading to a decrease in attendance year over year. And we'll follow that up with some of the newer arrivals in MLS. LAFC looking at possibly bringing Olivier Giroud on board, while Portland Timbers have already secured the signing of Cabecita Rodriguez. I'm Andrew. That's Connor over there. Grace is not in the shot, but she is sleeping sound above my shoulder. Connor, how you doing, buddy?
Did you forget your name for a second there?
I usually have a script that I go off of, and because we were kind of freehanding this one, I wasn't quite sure what I said after I introduced the topics.
We don't need a script. When have we ever needed a script?
I always need a script.
I went off script last episode.
Me too. Also, I'm never picking Lucci Acosta again. That dude is one.
Every time you pick Lucci, he puts up a stinker.
Dude, he has the worst body language I've seen ever. Like the second he's in a press and he gets beat, he's just like starts running, like walking back, like a little midget walk. Like, anyways,
that's what Messi does. It's the same thing.
Yeah, but Messi's elite.
Not according to the numbers last season. I mean, Lucci Acosta was an MVP finalist. Show me Messi's MVP finalist. Show me any of Messi's MVPs.
Which one of them played at PSG and which one of them fell short? That's what I thought. Yeah, that's right. I still remember those days. That's when you knew you were a sicko, when you can remember Lucci Acosta to PSG.
That was a really weird time.
Oh, man. Anyway, so you're doing good. I'm doing good. Maybe we keep that whole thing in. I don't know. I'll depend on what the edit sounds like. But listen, I want to dive into this stuff. We've been talking for a while here. I know you're hungry. I'm hungry. But we got to talk about scarves. We can't just skip that out because we're a little hungry. What do you got today?
I am paying homage to a former player that we were talking about this episode. I'm bringing out my Euro Snob scarf for Olivier Giroud. Oh, I see you're copying me now.
Don't mind me changing scarves. I forgot I had a cooler one. So the only reason I'm doing this is because I brought out Club America during our Not So Deep Dives, and I was like, all right, that's done. Been there, done that. But I don't remember the last time I brought out AC Milan.
That's an even more direct link.
Yeah, look at that. 1899. Decent design. Great material. Yeah, I haven't brought this one out in a little bit.
Looks like a little bit of a boring design, if I'm going to be honest.
Like I said, it's decent. It's not Portland Timbers like tree meeting in the middle. But all right.
Nothing will ever beat the tree meeting in the middle.
I don't know, man. There might be some crazy ones there. I'll ask you first. Do you want to start with the new additions, or do you want to start with Saudi Arabia?
No, let's end with Saudi Arabia. Right, like how Saudi Arabia is getting ended right now.
Oh, we have fun. All right, well then we're going to go straight into some rumored signings or confirmed signings, depending on who you are. Giroud to LAFC, rumored. I think transfer market with its very, very accurate rating device has it as a 75% chance to happen. Cabecita Rodriguez from Club America to Portland, done, dusted, signed, sealed, delivered. I guess let's flip a coin. Who do you want to start with? Giroud or Cabecita?
Let's start with the confirmed signing.
All right, let's go to Cabecita then. Give me your overall thoughts on the move based on price, based on fit, all that good stuff. Tell me what you think.
So I think it's a really good move for what the team needs. This team needs a striker. We talked about it in our Not So Deep Dive series when we talked about Portland. We said there's a really good core here. They have opportunity to add more because they had 2 designated player spots open. We figured one might be used on that striker spot, even though they had a couple of players there who could maybe get the job there like Felipe Mora, but they really needed to upgrade that spot. They needed a clinical goal scorer, and I'm glad that that's the position that they went for here. It looks like transfer fee of 4 million, transfer market values him at 4 million, so it seems to be a pretty fair price to bring him in. I wish I knew more about him because I just kind of am going off box scores, and it looks like he's very up and down. He was lights out with Cruz Azul. 16 goals in his second season there, then 21 goals in the season after that. Uh, Currently coming off of a stint with Club America, 11 goals last season, 7 goals so far this season. It's solid. It's pretty good. I think you'd be happy if you got that from him this season. But I think going into next year and his ceiling, you're looking for him to hit those Cruz Azul numbers. I think the worst case scenario is he hits those Santos numbers when he was there a bit younger, when he was about 23 to 25. Really was averaging a little bit less than 10 goals a year. If you're getting that as your out of your designated player striker, that's just not good enough for Portland. Like they have a really good team together. They need their striker to be scoring goals. If I knew a bit more about how he like his game style, the way he played, I'll kind of leave that to the Liga MX fans that listen. I'm sure they know him much better on whether or not he'd be a good fit. But I like the idea of it. He's shown flashes to be a really strong striker, even though there was 10 penalties taken that season. I am going to give it the benefit of the doubt and say that this is going to be a really good move for them and make them a contender at the top of the West, if they were not already.
Yeah, listen, I'm excited for this one. We mentioned again, you kind of hit a bunch of these points here that we mentioned that they really were just a DP9 away from being elite, right? Like Mora was a DP9, but like a one that fits with them. Mora was okay, not great. Um, you know, they're looking for this designated player number 9, and in comes this guy who scores a goal every 3 matches in Mexico. They don't overpay for him, which I think at one point there was some rumors going on that there was a Mexican league striker that was being rumored for like 15 million or something like
Yeah,
that.
yeah, from Monterrey. It was
Yeah, from Monterrey.
some of the B. I can't remember it exactly. Like
Yeah,
Bertarme or something like that. I
yeah,
can't remember.
yeah. You're right. Yeah, it is
I
Bertarme. Yeah.
probably butchered that so bad, but they'll
Um,
know who we're talking about.
yeah. Right. So you're getting talent without overpaying for it. A little bit older, 30 years old, which is fine to fit into this group that I believe is built to win now, right? This isn't a rebuilding. Let's find somebody who's going to grow and we're going to trend, they're looking to win right now, which is great. I think when I looked 7 of his 9, the half seasons that they do in Mexico, he had at least 5 goals in 7 of those 9. I think when you put them together, I think of those 5 years or so, I think 4 of them he had 10 plus goals in. Listen, he's going to get in, he's going to get on goal. He's got great service coming in, right? Front line of Cabecita, Anthony, Evander, Moreno, mix in Espria, Eric Williamson going forward when he can. Um, just it feels really good, right? Um, so that kind of one of my questions for that move was going to be, does this make them favorites in the West? And you kind of answered it already, but I'll see if you can expand on that a little bit.
I'm trying to call back. I think I had Seattle originally as my top in the West and Dallas too. I mean, so this is a little unfair because I got to see a little bit of how these teams are shaping up to start the season, but I I'll go out on the limb and say that yeah, I think they're the favorites for the West now with the signing. I think Seattle just has not enough attack in them, and Dallas clearly just has not been able to click so far. So Portland's looked good so far, and now they're adding a really good talent to a position that they needed. I think they're the favorites. If I could redo my standings right now, I'd put them number 1 in the West.
Just checking your I posted something here. You had them at 3. Yep. Yeah. Dallas at 2. You had Seattle at 1. I
Think you had them pretty high up too.
I had them at 5.
Still, that's
Relatively high, but but
Could still be pretty close at 5.
yeah. Listen, for me, I wouldn't be shocked if this team is in line for a supporter shield run.
Ooh.
On paper, right? Because I think Miami's going to drop off. We've talked about that. But on paper, this group is only going to be stopped by the depth of their attack, right? Those front 4 or 5 that we talked about, great. The next person up after that, not so strong. If they can all stay healthy and click the way that Neville wants them to click, oh man, this is going to be a really fun team to watch. The problem is every year they've always had 1 or 2 big injuries that have set them back and prevented them from being at the level that they should be at, right? But yeah, everybody healthy on paper, maybe one of the best teams in MLS.
Yeah, I could 100% agree. I could see this definitely being a team challenging for support shield.
Right, like their midfield, their center midfield group is 2-3 deep at either spot. Maybe missing a secondary playmaker, but that's okay. You can work around that. We talked about it. The back line all the way across, very strong, very deep. Kripo, one of the best goalkeepers in the league. Like, it's built to be very, very good. But again, when things are built to be very, very good in MLS, they usually end up being the opposite. So hopefully this isn't the case there.
Yeah, I think we may have just placed our curse on Portland. Sorry, Portland fans.
Yeah, that's on us. Sorry, y'all.
Maybe we can switch it right now. Portland's finishing dead last.
All right. Well, that's our little touch on Cabecita. Let's go over then to our friend Olivier. 37 years old. How's that make you feel, buddy?
Do I need to bring out my phrase?
Go for it.
Wrong side of 30?
Nice.
Just a little bit?
Just a little bit.
It's pushing on wrong side of 40 at this point.
Well, give me your thoughts about good, bad, indifferent. Let me hear what you're thinking in terms of, can he provide anything? Is this just a wash? Like, what are we talking about here?
I wonder if this will end up being the controversial take, but I absolutely would love to see this. I would love it. I think it would be so fun to watch. He's a guy that just, it doesn't matter how old he is. This guy just knows how to score goals. He is France's all-time leading scorer. He has scored goals every team he goes to. He's 36 years old. He's got 12 goals, 8 assists for Milan this season. I do not see this guy slowing down. He will, if he goes to the LAFC, he's going to jump right in. He's going to be banging goals immediately. He's so much fun to watch. He's a really he seems to be like a really great player to have in the locker room. Seems to be fun. I was really lucky to have been able to watch him a bit with Chelsea, and I know he didn't really get full starting time at Chelsea, but even in the times that he got to play, he was always contributing. He was making things happen. I think that's perfect for LAFC to help them, make that push for. I mean, obviously, like the only thing that I would say against this move is just for the fact that I think LAFC is in a position right now where I don't know if I necessarily see them as a team that's competing for the top of MLS right now. And Giroud is a very, very much win now signing. He'll be 36, 37 or whatever when he comes in. That's a very clear win now signing. Maybe they just do it for jerseys and just to, keep them in the playoff push for the current season and keep fans happy while they try to rebuild. But interested to see how that dynamic works out because LAFC rotated, I think, a few key pieces out in this offseason. I mean, there was a point where we were talking about them having like 12 players officially on the roster, and the season was not that far away. So a lot of new faces. We'll see if the Giroud win now signing is the right move for them. But I think he'll be so much fun to watch, and I think he'll still be scoring goals even at 37 in this league.
Yeah, so cautiously optimistic, right? We talk about players that we want, like if we're gonna sign players, we're gonna be exceptions to this retirement league player thing, right? Like the Lionel Messi's and the Zlatans and all that stuff. Giroud is so confusing in that thing because on one hand he's 37, right? Like that is the definition of guy trying to just end his his career on a nice high note and, get paid and go home, right? But on the other hand, he's 37, playing in the top league in Italy on one of the top teams with 20 goal contributions.
Yeah.
like clearly he can still ball. But there's also the question of how effective is he actually going to be, right? The pace is a little bit higher here, a little bit more hectic than it is in Italy. The travel is tougher. The surfaces are not as great. Experience and expertise, always a huge plus. Being France's top goal scorer is really nice too. Like, look at the list of French strikers that have come out of that country, and then you look at Olivier Giroud, just like, yeah, whatever, man, like having a good time. I'm telling you, you could easily put together, and I know this is like memed all the time, but genuinely, you could take his top 10 goals, put him in a compilation, and convince somebody who's like never seen this guy play before that this dude was Pele level. Like,
Yeah, greatest of all time.
He's unreal.
He's like Zlatan, but with like not as extreme personality.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is. He's Zlatan with like a filter.
Yeah, Zlatan with a filter. That's a good one. Listen,
So,
I want to jump in really quick for
Yeah.
a second, and hopefully I'm not stepping on a point you're going to bring up soon. But listen, this league just brought in another 37-year-old striker, and he has been lights out to start. So I'm not going to rule out Giroud coming in, another guy who's coming off a strong season, coming into his year 37.
Fair, and again, that's the quality level. Like, what level are we looking at? Right, it's not a 37-year-old who hasn't played in 2 years and is just coming to because he's got a big name, right? My worry, right, because I told you there are always two sides of it. My worry is he comes over to hang out with Hugo, his buddy, and uses it more as a place to set up his future than to focus on the present, right? And what I mean by that is, like, he's a professional, right? Like, I know he is going to come in, he's going to work hard, he's going to do it. But the second things get tough, at what point does he switch off and be like, you know what? The beaches in LA are nice. Maybe it's time to just start wrapping it up, calling it a career, and then coast his way through, right? He realizes that LA is kind of nice this time of year, and the beaches are cool and the weather's nice, and maybe he starts to think more past LAFC instead of present LAFC. And that's always my worry with somebody like that. Like with Cabecita, he's still got tons of years to play. He's still got tons of years to contribute. And he's been in Mexico too, right? Like, that comparison is always going to be similar. I don't think Mexico looks too much upon us now and is like, you guys are a bunch of fraud losers who we only go there to retire. Like, people come here to play, right? My worry is coming from Europe, where that is still kind of a stigma that might accelerate his thought process into, maybe we'll focus on it later,
I might come in with the controversial take here again, but I think if he comes in and even if he doesn't score double-digit goals, if he scores a couple of flashy goals, gets the buzz going a bit, gets some more eyes on the league and LAFC, I think that's great. I don't necessarily need him to go out there, score 15 goals, press for 90 minutes, push LAFC to go win a title. Like, I have tempered expectations because he's coming in at 37. I'm not expecting him to come in and light this league up and turn LAFC's season around. Like, I think if he comes in, brings some more eyes on it, maybe this is the move that gets Griezmann to jump over it. That would be phenomenal. Love to see that. Maybe this starts a pipeline of more people from the French national team making moves, whether it's later in their career or maybe even get guys starting to move a little bit earlier. But I don't necessarily need him to come over and light things on fire. Like, I think if he comes over and just generates some buzz, I think that's pretty good.
Sure, and there's always two ways to look at a signing, right? A person who can get more eyes on the league, which is a good thing for the league, and a person who can help you contribute and get wins and results and silverware, right? And having somebody who can balance the two, like a Zlatan was, or a Gareth Bale, Chiellini, right? Players who lifted LAFC ceiling and gave them the ability to win trophies while also bringing eyes to the league, right? All right, well then the big question in who has the better impact at the end of the day? Who's going to be the better signing if they both get through?
I think Cabecita. And that's not me saying that I think Giroud is a more exciting player to watch, and I think he's the better player if you look at their careers in total. But I think Cabecita is going into a better situation where it's a really strong team that has played together, knows how to play together. He's just going to be able to, I think, slide right in there. He's going to have really great support behind him, 10 deep. And I think that's going to benefit him, help him transition a bit faster into the league. Like you said, he's coming over from League MX, so this isn't completely foreign to him. He's played against MLS clubs. I'm sure, has seen plenty of MLS game, so it's not going to be completely foreign. I think all of those factors are going to mean that he transitions much quicker into the league, and I think Giroud can still be really exciting. I think he'll still score his fair share of goals, but I think Cabecita is set up to be the more impactful player.
Yeah, so I agree with you there. I think, of course, he's going to impact more. Giroud probably only has a year or two if he does make the move. Cabecita's got at least another 5. But that being said, in the immediate, and I kind of use this comparison already, I kind of see Giroud as a Gareth Bale like signing. Show up, score some big goals, get the team some important wins, maybe win some silverware, get more eyes on the league. Whereas Cabecita, I think, is more of a long term impact where you're going to set a standard with Portland. Say this is a guy we're gonna have him for 5 years. We're going to learn how to play around him. We're going to work. We're going to work. And we're going to figure it out, right? So, they might be competing more for long term success in maybe a Champions League or a Club World Cup type of environment, whereas LAFC might be looking just to get that last piece to get them over the hump of wherever they're at right now, right? So, yeah, I think Cabecita is going to be the more impactful player, whereas Giroud might be the bigger flash in the pan, if you will, right? If that makes sense.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. I mean, I think the only difference between Giroud and Bale is I think Bale was coming into a team that, and maybe this is partly because of himself, but he was on a team that we had talked about as being the best MLS roster in history, which may be topped by current Miami roster. That's debatable. But, versus Giroud coming into an LAFC team that's currently, I think, 10th or 11th in the standings right now. So I think the Gareth Bale impact, I think, might be different just considering the situations they came into.
Sure. Yeah, that's fair. All right. Well, as I said, that one much shorter than our USMNT conversation. But what we can do is we can talk about our friends across the pond. Saudi Arabia, rumored to just freeze their spending. I'm going to pull up the official thing just because I want to make sure I get this correct. It looks like it is from Sports Business Journal, and it reads as such. The Saudi Pro League will stop spending this summer after spending $867 million in the summer of 2023 and $25 million in the winter of January 2020. Well, it says 2004, but that's 2024, with an average attendance of 8,321 so far this year, down about 10% from the prior year. And then in very, very fine print, it says they were upset that within the time they spent this money, Todd Bowley outspent them, and he is one person. They're an entire government. Wait, no, sorry. Did I just make that up?
My owner is elite.
Your owner is getting you sent to the goddamn.
No. He's got enough money. We're not getting in trouble.
So we all kind of saw that this was going to happen. We talked about it in July, I think, of last year. But, everybody was out here like, oh, should MLS be worried about Saudi Arabian spending and them doing all this stuff? They brought in none of the players that were on our roster. Maybe Ronaldo as like a Messi-esque deal. But after that, none of those players were like, oh, these are the guys we're going after. Right. Just silly comments like that. But it's funny when you see stuff like this, and it's like, oh my god, like MLS should be terrified. Like, of course they shouldn't. And they never going to be, right?
Yeah, I mean, we had talked about this. I mean, come on, this was written in the cards. We saw this happen already in China. It's the exact same scenario. It's if you want to compare MLS to Saudi, it's a league that looked to just throw money at a problem and solve it, which didn't work in the past. And wow, imagine that didn't work again. Versus a team that's taking their time and building things up properly and now has built sustainability where they have really good academies producing really good young talent that's going to be able to continuously get you money to reinvest and then continue to build this pipeline and build credibility for the league as opposed to just being like, throw all the money, like let's just get the biggest names in here and sell jerseys and it's going to bring everybody to the stadium. And then now you have 8,300 fans per game.
The way I'm going about this, like, I'm not actually going to slander the Saudi league too much. I don't really care about them. I've never watched them, never was going to watch them. It didn't matter how many players they brought in. But this really stems into a more interesting conversation. And that conversation is the fact that even though right now MLS has done a ton of things wrong, the way that they have gotten to this point deserves a ton of praise. You can't grow, you can't throw money, as you mentioned, at a league and just expect it to jump up overnight, right? That is the mistake that was made beforehand in NASL when they brought Pele over and they're like, okay, well, everybody wanted to go see Pele. Let's throw, tens of millions of dollars at players, bring them all over, and everybody will fall in love. Well, it didn't happen, right? Saudi Arabia, Chinese Super League try to do the same thing back to back, decades, and they both end up the same way. They overspend. It doesn't lead to an increase in quality in terms of their like national team aspect, right? It doesn't lead to an increase in attendance. It actually led to a decrease in Saudi Arabia's context, right? And it puts you into a position where you are now, and again, it's a different sort of government there, right? You don't really get a say in what, to my understanding, you don't really get a say in what happens over there. So they're not super worried about like anything failing, but it can be frustrating when little things hold MLS back, right? But the fact of the matter is that you're not just going to wake up, kill the roster rules, change the system, and make soccer the number one sport in the country. Like, it's just not going to happen that way. So nearly $1 billion into Saudi Arabia, which, by the way, a league with promotion and relegation, no roster rules, $1 billion basically sunk into star players, some of the best facilities that they could build because they wanted to get the World Cup, and they can't fill stadiums. They've got stadiums with hundreds of people, right? So again, to flip flop back to our conversation where you say, oh, well, this is how you get people involved. Quite clearly it's not. Or at least there's enough proof to say that it doesn't always work, and you can't prove that it's going to happen here, right? This whole, Saudi Arabia is a perfect example of why the ideas that are spread in, I'll call it American soccer discourse, aren't thought through well. By that I mean, there's a ton of examples as to why things may or may not work depending on where you are, but it's a deeper thing than saying this one place makes it work or this one place doesn't work, which means we can't do any of it at all, right? There needs to be a middle ground of balance there. Yeah, that's kind of where I'm going to go. I'm going to stop before I get myself into hotter water there.
No, I think the analogy that I feel like I would use to describe MLS versus Saudi Arabia is, they're starting at point A, aiming to get to point B. MLS is taking the longer route, and yes, they're making some wrong turns along the way, but they're still working their way towards point B, whereas Saudi Arabia just tried to take a shortcut to get to point B faster, but the shortcut actually just led them in the complete opposite direction, and they've now moved backwards. So I feel like the way you look at the situation in MLS versus Saudi Arabia is that you got to build it from the ground up. It's not just a top down type of thing that's going to make things work. You're not just going to be able to buy the best players and all of a sudden make it work. Like even in England, like they didn't just wake up one day and we're the best league in the world. They weren't the best league in the world since 1899 or whenever they were around. Like it's been it's been many years, it's been like 100 years. They've been building it up, and the Premier League is at the level it's at right now because I think they've done a really good job of building it from the ground up.
Yeah, and there are arguments against that, the way you phrase that, right? Like ground up to somebody could mean USL2 all the way up, right? Starting at USL2, making them stable, and then working our way up. To me, I actually see us building it as a top-down system where we're focusing on our first division, making it as big as possible, as strong and stable as possible, and then dealing with whatever happens after that. But there are ways to go about the top-down method, right? And that's that's the difference between MLS and Saudi Arabia, where Saudi Arabia only cared about their top division, but instead of building it over time, they built it with one big swoop of here's $1 billion, go figure it out, which again doesn't necessarily fix the problem. And from again a Google search, whether it's true or not true, I can't trust all your sources, right? But soccer is the number one sport in Saudi Arabia, right? MLS is the number 5 sport, in number 4 sport. You can argue where it is, but it is not number 1 in America. So the comparison there is very interesting, because you would expect with that amount of funding and investment is the word I'm looking for, that you'd see a massive increase because the quality has increased, the level of certain teams has increased, and you would want to go out and see them, and that just doesn't quite happen. So again, to bring it back to an MLS centric view, it's impressive how MLS has made it to where it is, both locally and globally, right? In such a short time, right? This is 30 years. You talked about, the Premier League being 100 plus whatever. 30 years, we're looking now at being somewhere, and again, this is another arguable point, somewhere in the range of top 10 to top 25 in the world, right? Where there are leagues that have existed for 50, 60, 70 years with promotion, relegation, and all these things that people say we need, and they're not at the level that we're at, right? So there's a kudos has to be given to these people who planned, committed to, and believed in these systems that they've put together, right? Because that, I think, goes under the radar way more often than it should. So I do think that, again, while we are not in the best location right now in terms of PR for the league and what we've done recently, how we've gotten here deserves a lot of praise, because we've seen how it can go wrong and how we've avoided that.
I think I just want to clarify when I talk about the bottom up approach.
Sure.
When I say that, I'm referring to the fact that, like, I'm talking about like the start of someone's career versus their peak. And I think the way we've done it is by building academies and building a strong pipeline with South America to get these guys in and develop them, make them stronger, and sell them on, make more money, reinvest it, do it again. As opposed to Saudi Arabia, who was just like, let's just go get these guys right now in their prime, at the top of their careers, where, the only way forward when you're at the top is down. So, like, it's just going to, they're not going to gain value. The best you can hope for is you gain sales and you gain more revenue, jersey sales, whatever. The way we've done it, by building it from the bottom, getting these guys in young, building it up, building a reputation, selling guys on for profit, getting more money, reinvesting it. I think that's the way to do it, as opposed to just go grab these guys at the top of their career, where now we're hoping that just eyes are going to come in our direction.
Sure, and I'm sure they got a ton of money from, like, cause I think I saw like Fox bought some broadcasting rights for them or something, because they couldn't give it to or ESPN or one of those two that was like, oh, we're too good for MLS, but we'll go buy some random Saudi league that has 4 good teams. Anyways, they've gotten stuff out of it, but it's not been the turnover that one would expect out of and the conversation goes back to it. And it has a little bit of merit where they're like, oh, well, Saudi Arabia's population is like 30 million versus the America that's like 280 million or some comparison of that, right? That to me is fair to a degree, but it would explain more of a 8,000 average to 12,000 average instead of an 8,000 average to a 25,000 average. You know what I mean? Like it would explain a lesser increase, but it doesn't explain a non increase or a decrease. Does that make sense? I think it makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, I guess just to add on to that as well. I guess just to add on to that as well, like I could, to your point, I can also understand that to some extent, but at the same time too, Saudi Arabia as a country is a lot smaller than the US. So it's more plausible that the 30 million people within Saudi Arabia can travel to go to these games. Whereas if you're in the US and you're in Wyoming, you're in certain places in Nebraska, you are just nowhere near any games. Like and you're not going to take a 4 hour flight for a weekend just to go see an MLS game versus like in Saudi Arabia, like maybe you have to do a 2 hour drive to get to the stadium. Like a 2 hour drive here could literally be from like Long Island to New Jersey, right? Like that's covering maybe like 30 miles, and that could be 2 hours in itself. So I think there's obviously like there's more people in the US, there's a bigger population, so more people can see games, but I don't think people are necessarily all located within a reasonable distance from stadiums to go see games. And like I said, people aren't going to take 6 hour, 4 hour flights to just go see a game for a weekend.
Yeah, it's fair. And like I said, luckily for Saudi Arabia, this is government money, not a private investment. There's no fear for these teams to go under or anything because the government can just keep funding them or can lessen the funding and do whatever they want to do with it, right? But it does show a prime example of why money and whatever system you're using, it doesn't just equal instant support and booming success. And again, it's impressive the fact that MLS was not only able to recognize that, but also come up with a plan of action to capitalize on the other way, right? How do we put together a 5-10 year plan to get this to certain levels and get the investors to buy into it, right? Like they could have done all this stuff if they just had a government that was like, oh yeah, we're just gonna give you the money, you can figure it out, and we're just gonna lose it, right? Like it's equally as impressive. You can get people who have grown up in a football, baseball, basketball, hockey world to say, yeah, I'll give you a couple $1 million to start up soccer, right? Like it's just when you put it into perspective, it's very, very impressive to me.
Agreed.
So, yeah, let's finish up with one more topic because we need to talk about it. Because an RBNY legend, one Sacha Kljestan, came out of retirement to play for USL League Two side Des Moines Menace in Iowa. In their opening US Open Cup game, he went 120 minutes. He provided an assist and scored a penalty to help Des Moines advance. I think I'm saying that right, by the way, Des Moines. Advance to the next round of the Cup. So my thought, and again, this will be a quick segment. It wasn't supposed to be stuff that we talked about, but thoughts on this? Cool, bad? What do you think?
I don't see any situation where you could describe it as bad. But I think, it's a fun little thing for the cup. You get to see for Red Bull fans, I'm sure it's cool to see Sasha playing again. I would think the equivalent for me as an Atlanta fan, if I got to see like Parkey play again, I think that would be fun. But you mean I don't think there's too much more into it other than that. It'll be fun to watch him play. I think, he's already like making a difference on the team, assist and a penalty scored in the shootout. But I don't know. Are there people saying that it's a bad thing? Like, is there anybody that's saying anything negative towards it?
I have seen very, very few, but there was the suggestion that players coming out of retirement, and again, this was from the very, very anti US Open Cup crowd. Like, oh man, like to make this tournament relevant, you need to bring out of retirement like people who are on talk shows and stuff to like some ridiculous stuff. And then people were very, very quick to point out like FA Cup, whatever, right? Lower league, like people will go back to their original teams and play for their hometown, right? If they've got a small club, right? I think that is the beauty of the cup, man. I think that is exactly what this is about, right? Like you're in Iowa, you're watching the men's national team, you see Sacha Kljestan play, and you're thinking, man, it'd be really nice to see him play close. But the only time he's ever played was with the men's national team, which to my knowledge has never gone to Iowa because not many people do.
People usually leave Iowa, not go to
it. Chivas USA, which was in California, Red Bull, which was in New York, New Jersey, Orlando, which is in Florida, or overseas in Belgium, right? This guy now comes to your town. Yeah, he's a bit older, right? But it's something you would not get to see every day. Even when he was in his prime, there's no MLS in Iowa. MLS teams weren't really making the trips over to, because we mentioned in our last episode how tough it was for lower league teams to host. Like this is what the cup's all about, man. Like the quirky, unique things that you're just not going to see every day in league play. And I thought it was great. You know, I think the conversation was very, very cool where he had made a tweet about the cup and the importance and why it mattered and all that good stuff, right? And the owner of the Menace, excuse me, came out and got into his DMs and was like, "Listen, we're hoping to host a spot. We're hoping to host a game. We're gonna save you a spot, and we'd love for you to be a part of it to help spread the game and whatever." And you know, so I think they went to the same gym. I think was the story. Like they went to the same spin class, and Sacha crushed the workout. Like everybody else dying, sweaty. He just like walked out of there. And the guy kind of came back and he was like, "Listen, you're fit. You can play. I'm the owner of the Menace. I'd love to get you involved with our club and get you involved in the US Open Cup." He's like, "Oh yeah, like hit me up one day," right? Like not thinking it would happen. And it ended up happening right at the time that all this MLS stuff was going down. And Sacha goes in and does it, right? Man, that's so cool to me.
It'll be in the history stories, I'm sure of that.
Yeah, I bet you it will. But again, like I think it would be so cool. And you saw it again with and again, I don't know if they're just there because that's the like local team they're playing for now, but Bill Hamid, Anil Fisher playing for Nova FC, a Nisa side, like just that's cool, man. Like you can Nisa being as young as it is, a lot of those guys probably ended up watching. The fans of those teams probably were watching MLS and knew who Bill Hamid was and knew vaguely who O'Neill Fisher was. I mean, he wasn't the big mainstay guy, but he played in MLS, right? Now you're like, oh man, we're gonna go to the US Open Cup, and these guys, I'm gonna get to watch them play in person, maybe get an autograph, get close up pictures and whatever. That's growing the game, man. That's what gets this thing better. I think it's awesome. I think it's a really, really neat thing. People who don't like it, I think, are just looking for reasons to not like the cup at all. But man, that's the beauty of it. That's what the cup's all about.
All right, you got your Red Bull moment.
All right,
favorite
US Open Cup game so far. What was it?
I heard the Brockton game was good against Chattanooga.
I didn't watch that one, but I did hear it was good.
If I'm gonna pick a team, here's what I'll do instead. I'm gonna pick a team other than Atlanta, of course, that I will be rooting for. And I'm gonna go with Union Omaha because they have a sick logo.
Nice. I put our designated player podcast curse on Lexington SC, who got beat by Vermont, which was a great, very fun game. Funny, right? I tweet out like MLS Gone Wild's like, oh, I'm all aboard Vermont Green. I'm like, great, good luck today. I'm a big Lexington SC guy. I came from I worked there, whatever, right? Well, I start watching it. They go down 3-0 in 20 minutes. Oh my God, here we go. And the Then it gets like 3-1 before halftime. I'm like, all right. I turned it off. I went to edit our Fun Game Friday. And then I get these updates like, oh, it's 4-2. Oh, it's 4-3. I'm like, oh man, me getting away from it worked. I'm like, all right, let me watch the last 5 minutes. And we didn't score in the last 5 minutes. So I did
all your fault.
Yeah.
Should have just stayed away from it.
And then I watched them play against one Knoxville in the Bourbon Derby, I think is what they're calling it. Bourbon Trail Derby, I think. And they lost 2-0. So right now I am I think I've got to stop watching their games.
Yeah, seriously. For the sake of the club.
Yeah. Listen, I'll pick up Vermont too. I think Vermont's a cool club. I think very unique with what they're trying to do in terms of they're very FGR, if you're going to use the English reference, like very sustainable and things like that, which I think is kind of unique. And they had a great crowd show up. So I'll be backing them for the rest of the cup as long as they go. And then, of course, Red Bull 2 having a very nice 5-1 win was good to see as well.
I'm sorry to hear that for Vermont fans that are listening. Your team will be out in the next round.
Yeah, sorry. I do hope that with the hosting fees, they get to host again, because I think that would be a really, really nice thing for them. The community has bought into that club. They really, really enjoy it. So hopefully they get to host whoever ends up next. I don't know. They're going to do a redraw, so we'll see how that goes. But all right. Thanks everybody for listening. We hope you enjoyed it. I know I had a great time. Connor, he's happy to be here. I know he is.
I just exist.
Yeah. Make sure you follow us wherever you get your podcasts so you know the next time that we go live. That's any podcasting platform, to use the term my wonderful co-host brought in last episode. So Spotify, iTunes, all that good stuff. You can check out our website to find all that as well. And then make sure you're following us on social media. So Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, TikTok are the main ones that we're using. And we will make sure we post all of our clips so you can interact with us. It's going to be a really good time. So thanks so much again for watching. We hope you enjoyed it. And we will see you next time on the next episode of the Designated Players and MLS podcast. See ya.